Present, I cannot present, right? Sharing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi all. Next lecture 2 session of embedded software testing, the test management and the defect management. This is a unit 5. So in this session we will take to understand in continuation of what we have studied in the previous session. So in the previous session we studied about test management understanding what is test management means. So it has configuration management and test management itself. So you know, in configuration management we have configuration items, and in test management test process, how test process relates to the software, the model, design by contract, test driven development, agile development process, etc. We can study about that. And what is test management? Test management most commonly refers to the activity of managing the computer software testing process, right from the test planning till the test execution and reporting. We will study what it means in the next slides. What is configuration management? We know that any items that are to be controlled in terms of changing or delivering, etc., in terms of software testing, and it includes also the supporting documents. All these are all part of the configuration management. The examples we have: test cases, test plan, any documents, SRS. All these all are part of the configuration management. Configuration management elements are configuration items, configuration control, configuration status accounting, and configuration audit. These are 4 main elements of the configuration management activity. Okay, the configuration control can have hardware, software, documents, methods, tools, whatever it could be, and we do status accounting in terms of accounting all the configuration items, and audit will ensure that it is with the compliance of what is been planned. So in the general we had seen the definition of CM process as per the military standard HTBK 61A or ANSI standard. So the disciplines are planning, configuration identification, configuration control, status accounting, and verification and audit. And their details we had studied about CM planning and management, configuration identification, control, status accounting, verification and audit, and we had seen the model, how it looks like, the various blocks of or the elements of the configuration management. Configuration identification deals with the identification of configuration items, labeling of the CIs, it should be unique, how it should be, versioning and all that. We will try to study in detail about software configuration management today, and what are the naming and versioning conventions that are followed in the industry. Identification of baselines, so what is baseline and all that. Configuration control deals with change control, baseline establishment, version management. Configuration status accounting, recording and reporting information, describing configuration and items and their status. So the information will have what are the configuration items, to whom it is addressed, when it was assigned, how it is going to be moved to the next stage. Configuration audit basically does the auditing of the product configuration, its maturity, completeness, compliance with requirements, integrity and accuracy. And we have configuration management and testing. What should be configuration management? All test documentation and test wares, including tools and all that artifacts, and the test environment, the product to be tested, why it needs to be configured and tested, also the traceability part. So that is where is important lies in terms of all the relevant documents that needs to be traceable to one or the other documents, part of the software lifecycle for the embedded software testing. That is where we use configuration management elements. So now coming to SCM, software configuration management. So SCM is the process of identifying and defining the items in the system, controlling the changes of these items throughout the life cycle, recording and reporting the status of items and change requests, and verifying the completeness and correctness of items. So why SCM? When changes in a products that are being developed, we need software configuration management to control the changes so that they have minimal effect on the cost, schedule and quality. Basically we need to control the changes so that minimally the impact is being mitigated, addressed. It helps in development and change implementation activities. SCM activities help in accomplishing software quality assurance. SCM tools helps in tracking and changes made along with the respective name, and as we have seen, these are the SCM activities blocked, like in terms of planning, control management, status accounting, release processes, auditing and identification. Okay, now coming to today's session of test management and configuration management, we will try to understand software configuration management activities. So what are the things that are involved in SCM planning? So SCM plan is a document basically which serves as a reference for the SCM process. It defines the types of documents to be managed, like the requirement specification documents, design documents, etc. The kinds of documents which are subject to frequent changes are considered to get managed. This plan all defines the document naming scheme based on the customer suggestion or any consensus that are happening within the configuration item. The plan suggests who will be taking the responsibilities of SCM procedures. The document defines the SCM record which is required to be maintained. The SCM record basically identifies all the stages of the changes and who is owning it, who is responsible. The plan also describes the SCM tools like clear case or dimensions, etc. PVCS dimensions, Visual Source Safe, SVN, JIT. There are a lot of tools that are there in the industry. So these tools are basically used for carrying out the SCM activities. So the pros and cons of the tool also and the tool selection basis also are mentioned in the plan. Maintaining the SCM plan is also called as SCMP. There is a document separately mentioned for that. It's also mentioned in the document. So basically all these are involved in the SCM planning. So to define the SCM process, how it should be carried out, it identifies the types of documents to be managed like requirement specification, design, etc. Also the plan will specify about the document naming scheme, how the various documents throughout the software configuration should be named. The plan suggests who will be taking the responsibilities of SCM procedures. Planning defines the SCM record. The plan also describes the SCM tools. Okay. Continuation of the SCM activities. Software configuration identification. This steps deals in identifying the items to be controlled, establishing identification schemes for the items and their versions, and establishing the tools and techniques to be used in managing the controlled items. Establish the configuration baseline for each configuration items. Baselining, basically baselining is a very important activity that involves a managerial agreement on the content of a configurable item by a configuration control board. There is a board called CCB which involves subject matter expert in terms of CM, project management, etc. Basically they define and they come to a conclusion that this item can be baselined. Baseline is basically an event on which all the rest of the subsystems or the sub events are going to take place. Like requirement as baseline means that baseline will be used for testing. That baseline can be used for component testing, integration testing, system testing, depending on the type of baseline that we have. Similarly, we can have baselines for the test artifacts also like test cases. So we have developed the test cases and we come to a conclusion saying that these test cases are enough to go ahead for the next stage of activities. So we say that as a test cases frozen. This frozen is nothing but the baselining. Define naming scheme to identify the software configuration items of each and every document. That means naming scheme and identification of that configuration item is also an important aspect. So that also will be done in the SCM activities. Basically, software configuration identification deals in identifying the items to be controlled, establishing the identification schemes for the items and their actions, and establishing the tools and techniques to be used in managing the control items. Here we establish the configuration baseline for each of the configuration item. Baselining involves managerial agreement, as I said, of the content of the configuration item, and it is called as a baseline item. And the naming scheme also can be provided by the customer, or if customer can also have some kind of configuration. So we may need to align with the his configuration. Basically, this is also an important thing that we need to understand. Aligning the artifacts with customer configuration is also another important aspect, because he will also have some sort of a test artifacts or development artifacts or any other items that he wants to control along with the vendor or the contractor deliverables. So suppose we are a developer, we are a contractor or we are a delivery team delivering to the customer, then we may need to align to the configuration whatever the customer has, or it is also possible that he may ask for some suggestion to have a configuration by ourselves so that we can control by ourselves. That itself becomes an activity on its own. So that's what we do with the SCM process in identifying the software configuration. Okay. Next one is after we identify the software identification of the documents, we need to control it basically. That is what is called as software configuration control. So basically what we do here is managing the lifecycle changes. The lifecycle changes could be any of the test cases, procedures, execution scripts, any input documents, any reporting events, etc. All these lifecycle artifacts and its changes, maintenance will have to be managed. That's what we do with the configuration control. Process related to what changes to make, the authority to approve the changes, supporting the implementation of changes. All this will be part of the software configuration control. Next one is the concept of formal deviation from the project requirements. Suppose the requirement is going to change and there is a deviation in some sort of a activity, then we need to control that as well in terms of deviation process. The process of identifying what changes to make involves the formal procedure for submitting and recording change requests, evaluating the cost and impact of a proposed change. All the change requests are recorded in a change report. There is a change report that will identify what changes have been done. So what is the request against which the changes have been done, and what is the conclusion, who is the author, who is responsible, how it is controlled. All this will be part of the change report. An evaluation is done to determine the extent of modifications that would be necessary. So basically along with the change request will be evaluated to determine what is the modification or the change that is going to happen. So after the evaluation, what we do is there is a CCB, change control board. So basically it comprises both technical and non-technical people in terms of deciding whether the change is necessary and can go ahead for the next updates. That will be decided in the CCB, change control board. So basically the CCB evaluates the technical and managerial aspects of the change request, and either they will accept or ask some changes in the updates that are required, or they may defer it or they may reject it for the change request. So CCB has the full authority to accept or reject the proposed changes. The approved changes will be implemented using the SCM tools. Is it configuration control tool that will be used, which provide version management capabilities. So these changes have to be definitely controlled. That's what we do with the software configuration control. So throughout the life cycle of the test artifacts, it is going to be many changes. The managing the changes is covered in software configuration and control step. This step is concerned with covering the process related to what changes to make, the authority to approve the changes, supporting the implementation of changes. All this will be controlled. In addition to these activities, it covers the concept of deviation from the project requirements. The process of identifying what changes to make was the formal procedure for submitting and recording change requests and evaluating them. Evaluation also in terms of cost, schedule, what are the changes that proposed change is going to make. And we may identify some resources, we may identify tools to make the change, what is the procedure we are going to follow, any customer involvement also is required, all will be decided. This decision will be taken care by the CCB, that is configuration control board, and the source of change also will be identified during that CCB meeting. A customer request, it could be an enhancement, it could be a solution for a bug or some kind of a optimization, whatever it could be. All those changes have to be controlled and should be documented in a change request. It is called SCR, software change request. If it is a software change, also called as SCR. If it is a change request from a problem that has been identified before, it is called as SPR, or software problem report. Basically that identifies where is a bug, what kind of a changes, what is the cause, and all that will be information provided, and based on that the CCB will meet and decide on the change request. And in some projects these changes are communicated using a defect tracking tools such as Bugzilla. For a particular change, a bug is opened and all communications are done through that particular bug, and relevant stakeholders should be communicated accordingly. So that itself will become a SCR, or the software change request, that will be maintained within the tool, and automatically it is going to get recorded who is owning that change and who is responsible, who is doing the evaluation. All this will be taken care. So once an SCR is prepared or all the change requests are recorded in a bug, an evaluation is done to determine the extent of modifications that would be necessary. Based on this information, the CCB or the change configuration control board evaluates the technical and managerial aspects of the change request, and either they accept, modify, reject, or defer the change request. CCB has the full authority to accept or reject. In some projects, CCB members are part of the offshore team, and in some CCB members are entirely from the customer side also, it could be, or it's a mix of both customer and the other side, like the offshore team or test team or any relevant stakeholders, test engineer or test lead, anyone who is responsible. So the approved changes will be implemented using the SCM tools, which provide version management capabilities. Examples like CVS, VSS, SVN, which basically provides the version control capabilities. Here version control capabilities are something like check-in, add, check-in, check-out. These are possibly are the basic capabilities of the tools. Basically, it helps in identify the elements which are going to be added, which are going to be checked in, which are going to be checked out, which are going to be moving to a different stages. Always part of the SCM tool. So detail of all these things are not in the scope of this embedded software testing, but as a basic understanding, we need to know that software configuration control will be done through the SCM tools. The SCM tools help in terms of adding an element, checking in, basically, which will help in terms of creating a version and check out. For modifying anything, we need to check out the element, we need to update it, and we are going to check in back, so that it will be in the repository of the server. And that check in check out can continue for different stakeholders in terms of review, rework, release, and freeze. All these stages can be done. Next one, the software configuration status accounting. So software configuration status accounting provides the means to record and report on configuration data. It involves creating a knowledge base information necessary to manage configuration effectively. Its purpose is to provide the configuration information that is required for configuration management. Basically, it has all the information necessary to manage the configuration item basically. So it maintains the information about the configuration documentation. It maintains the products configuration such as version numbers or changes done on a particular artifact. It maintains information about the product's operational and maintenance documentation such as the documents affected by each change and their update status. Information about the CM process such as the status of change requests, all this will be part of the configuration status. Software configuration status accounting enables retrieval of information concerning change decisions and provides a source for configuration history of a product and all of its configuration documentation. All the data collected during configuration status accounting is maintained in configuration status accounting report, SCAR it is also called as. Configuration status accounting helps in establishing and maintaining configuration records for the configuration items. Okay, all this will be part of the project. The project will have this information in terms of any of the configuration identification done on the different artifacts and how it is controlled, who is maintaining it, so where the documentation is about, and the status of each of these items will be part of the accounting. This itself is an activity. So in a frequency they will generate this report, and that report will go into the next stage of the SCM activities, that is called audit. So the audit will be done by the auditee, who will ensure that each configuration item meets its requirements basically. So based on the summary that we have seen in the status accounting, the configuration auditor will audit the various artifacts to make sure that each configuration item is meeting its requirements. It's part of that particular activity. A software audit is an activity performed independently, is very important. This will be done outside the team. Usually QA can be involved, or there is any independent body that is designated to take care of this audit activity. Basically, they perform independently to evaluate the conformance of software products and processes to the standards, guidelines, plans, and procedures. So there are planned ways of controlling and identifying and doing the process of SCM. All these SCM activities will be audited with the help of auditor. Software configuration audits help in verifying that configuration management task for a particular CI has successfully achieved all of the requirements specified in the configuration baselines. So configuration baseline will be identified with the details in the configuration management plan. All this against that will be verified actually. And there are two types of audits that are done in. I take an example of one of the industry that we follow. Those two types of audits are FCA, functional configuration audit, otherwise physical configuration audit. So what are those? Functional configuration audit is done to ensure that a configuration item to audit it's consistent with its specification. So there is a requirement, there is a specification. We make sure that as per the specification it is consistently being followed and all the CAs are appropriately configured. That's what we do with the configuration, functional configuration audit. Okay, the next one is physical configuration audit. So this is basically done to ensure that the design and reference documentation is consistent with the built software product. That means whatever eventually we are going to build, whatever we are going to test, whatever we are going to deliver is consistent again and again with the changes, with the configuration that we have in the configuration repository. That's what we physically verify against the references that we have in the documentation. Here we do with the consistency check with respect to the specification what we have specified. Basically what we do is we verify that the software functions and its performances they are really comply with the requirement, and that impact of deviation if any are analyzed and controlled. All this functionality in terms of how configuration is performed is all will be checked with the help of functional configuration audit. In physical configuration audit we will check for the hierarchy, the physical representation, naming conventions, all this will be are they ready in a complete stage or what is that being followed. So that is about SCM activities of software configuration audit. So we have gone through the software configuration identification, software configuration control, software configuration accounting, and software configuration audit. These four elements are the basic elements that are used in SCM activities. And planning is of course part of the either project management plan or we can have it as a separate SCM plan itself. Some industry like aerospace they have a separate plan and that is a deliverable. This itself is a configuration item again. So this is a mandatory to have industries like aerospace. So we need to have a SCMP or software configuration management plan document. Okay. Now let's try to go through configuration items for life cycle. So what are the configurable items it could be in the embedded software life cycle and how they are going to be baselined. So we know that baseline is an event where we are going to baseline that particular artifact, saying that that artifact is ready to move for next stage or next event or it's available. So that will be spoken in the configuration identified list basically. Okay, so you can see two columns. One is a CI list, the various documents and artifacts. On the right hand side, you can see a baseline event. Upon which baseline event, this will be called as baseline. These items are called as baseline. I picked up few examples from a typical embedded industry. Okay, when we get a outsourced embedded software testing or embedded software project development, it could be. So what we do is we first get the proposal or the contract or the statement of work. So all this will be configurable again because there could be a change, right, over a period. So definitely the change control has to happen and those should be part of the CI. Okay, so the event is on receipt from the customer, we are going to have a request for proposal or RFP, or we can get a statement of work from the customer. So that itself is the baseline. We are going to baseline, and we have a proposal. Internally, we develop the technical team and the manager or the test manager or the lead, and the proposal. Once we approve internally with the help of a senior management team, we are going to say it as a baseline event. So this proposal will be submitted to the customer. Okay, the next element of the life cycle is all customer supplied items. When the contract is awarded, they are going to have a statement of work, customer supplied any standards, any coding rules, specifications, guidelines, customer requirements, or any tools you can provide, any board, for example target board for testing, any equipments, etc. All these are considered as imported items. We will maybe try to touch base this important configurable items maybe in a future slide. All this will be part of the CI, and that is called as a baseline when we receive from the customer. All planning documents that we have internally, like project management plan, project testing plan, all this will be approved by the senior management, and we are going to have it called as a baseline. Then we have engineering outputs like requirement specification, design, source code, test plans, etc. This also should be approved stage by stage by the customer or senior management or the project management. If it is internal project or if it is customer oriented project, based on that, this will be called as a baseline event, and against the baseline event we are going to baseline the particular CIs or configuration items. And any project specific checklists, templates, this also can be a configuration items, and this basically needs to be approved by the quality team so that the baseline can be created. Then we have the test environment or the project environment. This will be identified as and when in the project and approved by the project manager or the test manager. And next one is the hardware, tools, test facilities used to validate the product. It could be a test equipment, test machines, laptops, any wiring boards, any target boards, any emulators, simulators, any flash programmers. All this part of the hardware and tools that directly affects the quality of the final product. All this will be controlled through CI list, and that also needs to be approved by the project manager to make it as a baseline. That's what configuration items typically follow in the embedded software testing or embedded software life cycle. Okay, the next one is about SCM phases. What are the software configuration management phases that are involved? Those are 4 phases: initiation, planning, execution, and closure. This will go in a circular fashion. That's why I had put a simple arrow to identify at each end of the arrow initiation, planning, execution, and closure. So what are we going to do in initiation? What are we going to do in planning? what we are going to do in execution, and how are you going to close it. So these are basic elements of the SCM. Okay. Initiation. So what are we going to initiate? We are going to initiate software configuration management by appointing a configuration controller. Basically, he controls all the configuration items, and we are going to appoint CCB, as I said, configuration control board, which could comprise. I will try to put configuration controller. He can also be called as an admin who can maintain all the artifacts under the configuration. Configuration control board, which could comprise of a PM and a CC. It could be a TL, a team member or test member. It can also involve customer as well. So basically, these people will take a appointment in terms of CCB when we define the project plan or the test plan. And for doing these activities, we need training. So that is also called as configuration control training. And there are various roles and responsibilities that we have for each of the configuration initiation activity. So for example, we have a project manager. His responsibility would be SCM planning, and we will do SCM activities monitoring or tracking, and he is also a CCB member. So by becoming a member, what he does is he will also be equally responsible for taking the decisions for the changes. Next one is the configuration controller, CC, also called as a CC. So he will basically provide inputs to PM for what SCM planning. He will ensure that the work products are identified, because we need to identify the configuration items, and he should make sure that it is controlled. That means all the check-in, check-out, admin activities, creating the folders, locations, all this will be taken care by the CC or the configuration controller. And he is also responsible for version control. He will basically do the baselining. He will do the status routing, as I said in earlier slide. Information about the baseline information, baseline artifacts in the repository of the configuration control should be reported. All these are deliverables. It could be, or it could be CIs. So basically, he has the ownership of controlling it. Basically, still the individuals of the test member or the test engineer has the responsibility of controlling in terms of individual items like source file or test cases, etc. But overall, the CC takes care of the complete control. Next is the CCB. So this board basically comprising CC, PM, test lead, and it can involve customer and SM, that is senior manager also. So this board basically authorizes the CI's identification and project baseline and changes. So these are some of the important activities, and they should approve also, because without approval changes will not occur. So those are some of the responsibilities of the project manager, CC and CCB. This will be initiated during the initiation phase of the SCM. The next one is a planning. So planning, what we do basically, we will identify the project CI, identification of project folder structure and access rights. This is very important thing. CC will take care of this. Folder structure will be created, and who should own read access, who should own the write access, who should own no access, who should own change access. All this part of a permission will be granted or denied by the CC based on the project planning, and identifying the criteria for baselining and rebaselining, identifying the naming and labeling mechanisms, the conventions that are followed, and identification of change control mechanism, how it's going to be changed, preparation of CM audit plan. As I said, configuration items have to be audited for the status accounting and the plan against that. That preparation will be planned, frequency or duration of that, all this will be part of the planning. Then this is also important, review and baseline of SCM plan itself will be part of the planning. The next two SCM phases are execution and closure. In execution, what we do is any configuration management issue we are going to resolve. SCM audits is also part of the SCM execution. Change management is also an execution. Maintenance, maintain the list of CIs, import export items list like customer deliverables, customer supplied materials, returnables after the project is over. All this will be part of the execution, which will take as an activity during the SCM. And of course, maintain the control library and repositories. That repositories have to be regularly backed up or archived. That is what the maintenance means: backup, archive, and deletion. Basically, there is a term called retention. There is a retention period. Any project is supposed to have a retention period. Why? Because that may go for a callback, or that may go for a rollover, or that need to be maintained again, triggered from the customer input or internal, or any maintenance or warranty or guarantee, whatever is required. Till that period, retention has to be taken care. So all this will be part of the execution that is defined in the SCM plan. This is an important SCM phase. Lastly, what we are going to do in the SCM phase is the closure. Once all the project activities are done, we are going to have the SCM closure. So return of materials as applicable, we are going to return either to the customer or to the vendor. If we have rented out any power supplies sort of a material, we are going to return them, and conduct closure meeting with identified stakeholders. We need to conduct closure meetings of the project. So what basically it does is it identifies any lessons or practices that we have done in the project. We are going to document it, and that also can be configured and closed. Once we have done all this, we are going to archive the elements, the CIs as needed. We are going to create a backup and put a retention and safety plan in terms of where to keep, what is the location, and all that. This will be part of the closure activities. Okay. The next one is the example. Let's try to understand SCM process example. how it's going to be defined and all that. So simple way of doing it is objective. We are going to define the objective of the SCM process to identify items for configuration, to manage baseline, to control changes and library of configurable items, to monitor the status, to perform reviews, audits and release processing of configurable items throughout the life cycle of the project. And scope of the SCM process is covers the planning and execution of configuration management related activities, including version control, change management and release management. This process is followed in all the phases of the project life cycle as identified in the project management plan or the project plan. This process applies to all configuration baseline items, documents, software and hardware. When required by development, agreement, proposal, the process may also apply after delivery of the product. You need to have this process. So what are the SCM process tasks? Example tasks: establish the CM environment, configuration management environment, identify the CIs, create intermediate and final product baselines, raise CR, PR. CR is change request, PR is a problem report. The change request could be due to problem report also. Problem report is nothing but identifying a problem of the tested software or tested feature and reporting them to the relevant stakeholder. It could be a development team, it could be a customer or a vendor, anyone. Basically, it's part of the modification in the software lifecycle. Perform change analysis for the PR and approve or reject the changes required. This is also an important process. Report status of software lifecycle items, baselines, PRs to the relevant stakeholders and maintain the configuration management records. This is also one of the process tasks. Okay, so next CM activities process from the admin perspective. As I said, admin could be a change controller or dedicated change control could be there. Admin can be different, but most of the mid-size projects, the admin and the change controller will be same for the particular project identified. So what he does is he does perform archival, retrieval, release activities. He does the follow data retention mechanism for the SDLC data items. As I said, retention is an important thing. We need to retain the project lifecycle artifacts till the term or the guarantee or the project is maintained in the organization with relation to the customer. Perform load control of the software product, manage software lifecycle environment and qualified tools. That is also part of the admin as part of the CM activities. Next is the status accounting. So what we do with the status accounting is that we keep track of the current identification of CIs, configuration of delivered product, status of change requests, status of approved changes. All this will be reported in a report format. That's what we do with the status accounting. Basically, there is a frequency like bi-weekly or weekly or monthly, depending on the project nature and the size and other aspects. We are going to do the status accounting accordingly. Okay. And the status accounting can also report some of the items like number of SCM issues. Basically, this is done by the CC or the admin for that particular project. What are the deliverables? Deliverables, whether right deliverables, accepted, rejected by customer, all this will be reported, and effort spent on SCM activities by the CC. and effort spent by team not on development or testing, by on the SC, like check in, check out, all the regular activities in terms of configuration control. And another important thing is change requests, its numbers, accepted, rejected, on hold, open, close. So all this sort of a information will be part of the change request status report, can be done by the status accounting mechanism. That's what we do with the status accounting. Okay, next coming to the important item called version control. So what is a version? So anything that identifies one configuration item with a number or the name, that process is called versioning. So configuration item will be versioned. The version number of CIs is maintained in the following format. In general, I am talking about basically draft versions will have 0.01, 0.02 or 0.2, or it can have something like A, B, C, or alpha, beta, theta, whatever it could be. So basically it is identified with an example of 0.1, 0.2, etc. till it becomes matured and complete. It will be flowing like this. So you may argue like after 0.9 what I will do. You can easily go with 0.91, 0.92, etc. till it reaches 1.0. Basically we call 1.0 as a baseline version, and that 1.0 version could have multiple baselines in next versions like 2.0, 3.0. Basically this is a major versioning. This will be taken care with the higher number in the integer. So what will happen with 1.0 if there changes are going to happen? We can create as 1.1, or we can create as 1.a, 1.0a, 1.0b, 1.2, etc. It is up to the definition or the planning of the SCM how we are going to have this. Remember, this has to be done during the SCM planning. And if any minor changes and major changes are to be versioned, that can be versioned with 1.1, 1.2. Any major changes, it will be 2.0, 3.0, and once the major changes are done, we can make it as a baseline 10.0, something like this. So this is what we do with the version control. Okay. The next important thing is the baseline. So what do you mean by a baseline? A baseline is defined as a milestone in the development of software that is marked by the release of one or more configuration items, and approval of these items is obtained through a formal review. So everything has to be formal. So we call it as a baseline version or a baseline for an item. It is a milestone in the development or testing of the software that is marked by the release of one or more CIs. It's very important thing, configuration items, and it requires the approval of those items which are going to be obtained through a review process. As we have seen in our earlier session, there is a formal review. That review items have to be completed and closed, upon which we are going to say that the product is matured and reviewed and complete, and against that we are going to create a milestone by the name called as a baseline. So minimum baselines we can have initial baseline, delivery baseline, other baselines, and it could be intermediate baselines also. And of course the kind of baselines we can create in terms of versioning is minor baseline, major baseline, but usually they have a minor baseline, major baseline, in terms of initial baseline and delivery baseline. And after delivery or before the final delivery, we can have intermediate baselines such as SRS, design, testing baselines. This will be part of the baseline activities. Okay. So the next one is workspace management. How an workspace is getting managed. We know that baseline has to be created in a repository, and that repository needs to be taken care by all the stakeholders, right from the SCM process people, test team, development team, etc. So definitely there is a need of a workspace. The workspace is nothing but a placeholder having identified and available items such as CI items in the project. That's what we do with the workspace management. How are we going to manage in general? This picture you can see there is a baseline repository, something like a server, and this server the files will be either put or taken out with the help of a process called check-in and checkout, and this will be done by individuals. That is called individual workspace that will be there in the desktop. And for testing and verification workspace, we have a separate repository and separate files will be there, and that will be again using the baseline repository. All these life cycles have to go through the repository, that is called baseline repository, and it is part of the workspace management. And this all will be taken care by the individual as well as the maintenance and the control of that will be done by the CC or the change controller, configuration controller. Storage retrieval is performed in a controlled manner. The format, location, access control procedure like writes and all that. Backup and recovery procedure. How are you going to backup and how are you going to recover? Suppose some file is deleted, we are going to recover it after we get an incident report from the individual or the users. So we will have a backup, and the backup will be used for recovery. All this will be defined in the workspace management. Okay, so that is what we have studied about the different SCM activities process, status accounting, version control, baseline, and workspace management. In the next class, we will study about change management, incident management, revision history, how it should be, and configuration management tools, etc. So with that, we will conclude today's session of the configuration management.